we're going to go ahead and start the call-in roll call, and we've contacted Regent Tinsley, so hopefully he can join us shortly. But with that, we can go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Laura,
you.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to know if you're going to do a brief roll call of the.
Yes, we're opening the meeting with Dr. Edwards now, and then we'll do roll call. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Dr. Edwards.
Okay.
Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to the Telephonic Rules and Regulations Committee meeting for May the 12th, 2020. I am Regent Veronica Moosky-Edwards, chair of this committee. The time is 2:03 p.m. Notice of this meeting was provided to the Secretary of State as required by Texas Open Meetings Act, Government Code, Chapter 551. Please note that audio of this meeting is being broadcast live. Before we take roll call, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute their phones unless you need to speak. Laura, let's begin the roll call with committee members and any other regents.
Okay, thank you. Chair Edwards.
Present.
Regent Flores.
Here.
Do we have Regent Tinsley? Not yet. Regent Scott.
Present.
Regent Harrell.
Present.
And do we have any other regents on the call?
Student Regent McCall.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Laura. And we can now begin the roll call with committee members and any other regents.
You mean system staff?
System, yes, thank you.
Sorry.
System office representatives, yes.
Sure. Chancellor McCall.
Here.
Dr. Gomez.
Here.
Daniel Harper.
Here.
Therese Sternenberg.
Here.
Nelly Herrera.
Here.
Dr. Hayek.
Here.
Thank you. Sean Cunningham.
Here.
We have Derek Alexander.
Here.
And do we have any other system staff on the call? Thank you.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you again. And now can we have roll call for component representatives?
Sure. Lamar University.
Ken Evans and Jeremy Altop.
Thank you. Sam Houston.
Carlos Hernandez for Dr. Hoyt.
Thank you. Sol Ross.
Bill Kibler here.
Thank you,
And
Dr.
Chris Clifford is also here.
Thank you, Chris. Happy birthday, Dr. Kibler, by the way.
You could have gone all day without saying that.
I almost made it all day. Texas State University.
Denise Strauss here, along with Eric Algo and Lisa Lloyd.
Thank you. LIT.
Lonnie Howard, Bonnie Albright, and Angela Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Lamar State College Orange.
Tom Johnson, Wendy Elmore, Mary Wicklund, and Patty Collins.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And finally, Lamar State College Port Arthur.
Betty Renard and Mary Wicklund.
Thank you, Dr. Renard. That concludes roll call.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Kibler, I will save you the attempt of us virtually singing happy birthday to you, but please take best wishes on behalf of all of us. So with that, I'd like to note that Dr. Gomez briefed me on the agenda items prior to the meeting. At this time, I ask that he present the Rules and Regulations Committee agenda items. Dr. Gomez?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Regents, Chancellor, and colleagues. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. And Daniel Harper, Vice Chancellor Harper, or anybody else who wants to weigh in on these, please do so at any time. The first rule on a proposed rule, Laura, there was a ping there. Could that be Regent Tinsley?
No, sorry, that was me.
Okay. The first rule on page RR1 is pretty much a cleanup rule. This eliminates language in the rules identifying the types of expenses that are provided for in the government code, and the statute, as well as everyone on the campus and in system administration, already know what is reimbursable and what is not, and so it just basically cleans up the rule. RR2 pertains to holiday schedules, and what this does is it delegates the board by statute is charged with setting holiday schedules, and by statute as well as by board policy, the board may delegate that. This is a request for delegation to the chancellor to work with the presidents in setting schedules. My understanding that the president sometimes sets schedules to coincide with what local school districts are doing, and what this does, I think, is pretty much remove a function from the board that probably best handled at the local level, and this would allow the chancellor to work with the presidents in accomplishing that. Rules and regulations number 3 has 3 parts to it. The amendment to 1.11 is a house cleaning item. Currently, the rules say that items between $500,000 and $1 million contracts between $500,000 and $1 million require approval by the chancellor, and contracts in the amount of $1 million or over require approval by the board. A little bit of a conflict there, and what this does is it kind of cleans it up to make sure that everybody understands that the chancellor's authority ends at $999,999 from between $500,000 and $999. Item number 2 has 3 points. It pertains to purchasing with respect to presidential spending limits, certain energy future strip agreements, and Vice Chancellor Harper, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that. I think you could explain it more articulately than I.
Yes, sir, Dr. Gomez. So on this item, it really ends up just being a timing issue. So Texas State University is one who actively uses these, and they help pretty much lock in their utility costs throughout the year. But the issue that we've kind of experienced over time is that when they go to the market and they get the current rate, it needs to be bound that day. And we've ended up with timing issues of the university trying to bind those and get those all the way to the system for approval and back. So what this does is it allows the presidents to authorize those, and then they send us a copy of it at the system office so we're still aware, versus us trying to execute at the system office due to timing constraints.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Harper. Item number 3 at the bottom of the page. This is an item that's pretty much housekeeping. This is handled under the planning and construction policy. So we've eliminated it from here, and would note also that the planning and construction policy is subject to board approval. So the board loses no oversight on this item. On page 5, RR5, the next 3 pages, 5, 6, and 7, are pretty much considered as a group. What this does, what these rules essentially do, is they reserve to the Board of Regents the authority to decide and not to decide, but to, upon the recommendation of the president and where appropriate, the chancellor, it allows the board to be the final word on faculty matters. There's nothing added that's new. It's all been rearranged and put into the preface to preamble to section 1.2. And what it basically says is the tenure decisions, the granting of tenure, the revocation of tenure, which you had a revocation the last board meeting, changes in tenure and so on, those still remain board matters. But what it does also is these sets of rules is they delegate to the presidents the authority to hire and fire their own administrative personnel, as well as their, and I will address unclassified and classified employees here in just a minute. If you look at page 6, this pertains to administrative employees of the campuses, vice presidents, deans, other administrative personnel that have authority delegated by the president. And so this does two things. One, it relieves the president in 1.123 of having to file with system administration every time the president appoints administrative personnel. That should be a presidential function. It's delegated to the presidents in the and it's expected of the presidents in Chapter 4 of the Rules and Regulations. So this basically relieves that administrative action of reporting to system administration. The second thing it does at the bottom of the page is it says that the president of each component is authorized to employ, and it takes away the recommending annually to the chancellor for presentation to the board of these administrative employees. And again, if we're talking a dean, for example, we're talking certainly several layers down from the chancellor and several layers down +1 from the board. As far as the next page, page 7, all this really does nothing that's not there. The president has already delegated the authority in 5.11 to appoint staff, classified and unclassified staff, to appoint, to hire. And in 5.2, the president already has the authority to dismiss or terminate and to set terms and conditions of employment, or to terminate faculty or staff, classified and unclassified staff. And what this provision does is it adds the additional phrase that the president is authorized to set terms and conditions of employment, which is a given. And in fact, your grievance policy in Chapter 5 essentially provides additional authority that the president may set terms and conditions of employment from which people can grieve. Those are the three that deal with the with administrative and rank and file personnel. Again, the faculty section is left intact. And I would point out a couple of things. One, these decisions are already made by the time they're presented to the board. And secondly, the rules and regulations, as I stated, already authorize the presidents to manage employment, certainly for classified and unclassified staff. I would note that we researched the other two large systems in the state, UT and A&M, as well as Tech, I guess the other three. And these delegate the function, this function of appointing staff, but not faculty, has been delegated to the presidents within those systems. So we're in sync with what other systems are doing. Okay.
Dr. Gomez, Dr. Gomez, this is Laura. I just wanted to confirm that at 2:09, I believe we had Regent Tinsley join us. Regent Tinsley, are you on the call?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Go
ahead.
Good afternoon, Regent Tinsley, and I'd be happy to discuss what you missed.
Oh, that's fine. For some reason, I had a bad code number, but it put me on music and said the meeting will start in a minute.
Oh, my. Well, that's happened to me, so that's certainly understandable. On page 8, this pertains to principally the executive compensation for the chancellor and the president. The authority of the board with respect to hiring and termination remains unchanged. The authority of the setting of salaries remains unchanged. All this does is take out a provision that's in the Appropriations Act that essentially says how much you can pay with appropriated monies and how much you can't. And Daniel, I don't know if you want to speak any more to that. If you have anything else that I've not addressed.
No, you did a good job, but in support of you, I'll reiterate it. The appropriations bill authorizes or limits the total salary of the chancellor and the president to somewhere around $60,000, but then authorizes the board and the chancellor to quote unquote supplement above that. And the board does approve the chancellor's supplement and they approve his salary, and the board has delegated that authority to set the salary supplement as defined by the appropriations bill to the president. So this just cleans up this section of board rule to align with the rest of board rule as well as practice.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Harper. Rule RR9, I wonder if you wouldn't mind addressing that as well. It deals with the tuition and fee setting authority of the board, which I understand remains unchanged, but you might explain how this all works.
Yes, sir. So on RR9, you'll see there's a lot of red on there, but what we've done here is just pretty much updated the nomenclature and then aligned the board rule with the format that is used when we present tuition and fee motions to the board. Tuition and fees going in November, room and board going in February traditionally. Through here, it includes designated tuition, all of the mandatory fees, and then we've also come through and added new fees that were not in existence probably when this rule was originally created, such as dual credit early high school college. We have an institutional services fee, clarifying program fees, lab fees, etc. So it's really just a clarification of current practice and current nomenclature.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Harper. The rule on RR11 is essentially cleanup. This pretty much pertains to the relationship between the Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer and the campuses, and which calls for a monthly operating report to go to the VC and CFO, and this eliminates that. And Vice Chancellor Harper, I don't know if you wanted to talk to this one as well.
Yeah, not much more to add. This is Daniel. I mean, it's there's a provision in our rules that requires a monthly operating report. I presume that it is kind of a vestige of the past, and it's not anything that I have seen in my time here, nor do we see real value at that level to receive the information on a monthly basis.
Thank you, sir. The rule on page RR12 has three parts. The first, in 10.21, we've already talked about, and that pertains to the spending authority of $500,000 to $1 million. We talked about that previously. The deletion in section 10.23 essentially takes away a provision which says that the president has delegated authority to approve increases to board-approved contracts, purchases, and agreements in an amount not to exceed 10% as long as the original amount does not exceed $50,000, and this essentially removes that delegation. The third change with respect to contracts essentially the Board of Regents, what this says is that any contracts, purchases, and agreements shall be entered into after each instrument is considered for approval in an open meeting, and the instrument shall identify the component on whose behalf and shall be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Essentially, sometimes we have, in fact, many times we have handled contracts by the board as the legal entity which oversees these institutions, purchasing a piece of property or purchasing principally property for and on behalf of an institution. And this removes that nomenclature. Doesn't really matter very much at all, because the Board of Regents of the Texas State University system is the Board of Regents for Lamar University and the Board of Regents for LIT and Sam Houston and the rest of them. So it's just, you're not really doing anything but changing the name on the contract. Rules and Regulation 13, page 13, is delegated as a housekeeping to remove an antiquated provision that is just not operational, not part of our operations any longer. It deletes a delegation of authority with respect to scholarships. And then finally, Rule and Regulation 14 pertains to requirements imposed by Senate Bill 12 and House Bill 1735 of the 2019 legislature. And what this essentially does is says that everyone on the campus has the authority or has the duty to report sexual misconduct. And I would note, and I wish you would speak to this briefly, because I think it relates to the sexual misconduct policy of the board, which is what we're talking about here. But the Federal Department of Education has issued regulations with respect to Title IX, and those regulations call for implementation by August 14th of this year, August 14th, 2020. And those just came out last week, and within the last week or so. And so we have very little time to cull through 2,033 pages of federal regulations. And so I wanted to tell you up front that you're not going to get a lot of notice on these, but what we've done is we have created some committees. Our committee headed by Deputy Vice Chancellor Nelly Herrera, and I wish he would tell you briefly what this is all about and how this thing is going to come down.
Sure. What we've done is we have created a Title IX working committee. The Title IX working committee consists of the council in the general counsel's office and each of the Title IX coordinators for each of our campuses. We had our first call this morning, and what we are doing is we are basically taking our sexual misconduct policy. We are going to go through it line by line to make sure that we remove those sections that have to be removed, or that we add sections that need to be added in order to be compliant with the new federal regulations that were just released on Wednesday of last week. As Dr. Gomez said, the regulations, they have an expansive preamble, and there's a lot of information in the preamble that which must be able to digest before we actually start making changes to our policy. So we are on a very short time frame in order to make sure that our policy is going to be compliant with the federal regs, but we are also cognizant that we will be compliant with our regulations that have been imposed upon us, or the statutes that have been imposed upon us by the last legislative session.
Thank you, Nellie. And the other thing I would say is that we expect a draft to the committees. Nellie's committee expects to have a draft for us by around the middle of July. And while we normally don't send out drafts before they're fully vetted, in the interest of having everybody informed as to what's going on ahead of time, we'll do two things. One, we'll send you that draft, and secondly, after the May board meeting, after next week, I will send you something that basically outlines the changes that are the major changes that are going to have to be made, so that you know what's coming and can anticipate. But because we have to be operational by September 1, it just puts a great deal of pressure, not just on us, but other institutions of higher education in this country. That's all I have, Madam Chair and regents, chancellors, presidents, colleagues.
This is Bill. When you get those changes, Fernando, will that come out of this committee?
Yes, the changes to, you mean to Title IX?
Yes.
Sexual misconduct? Yes, sir. It'll come out of the Rules and Regs Committee.
Okay. I felt sure, but I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yes, that's the way we've historically handled it, and yes, sir. But because of the exigency, we will make sure that every member of the university community, regents, presidents, vice presidents, vice chancellors, everybody is comes along with us, even with the draft, so that you have at least a little bit of an understanding of what's going on, because it's 2,033 pages that's just a lot of stuff to have to digest within the time frame indicated. It's just an awful lot.
So I want to thank everybody. Thank you very much, Dr. Gomez, for going over the summary of the changes. Everybody who basically had the contributions and the recommendations involved with simplifying this document. It's very much appreciated, the way you present it and the way your team has basically gone through there to provide us with a more compressed document. So thank you again. And with that, are there any items that any regents want to move off the consent agenda? Hearing none, with your permission, Regent Flores and Regent Tinsley, I want to move that we recommend board approval of the amendments on the consent agenda. Regent Flores, do you agree to move forward?
I concur.
Thank you very much. Regent Tinsley, will you agree to move forward as well?
Yes, I do.
And with that, we will move forward with the recommendations for the consent agenda. Did I hear someone else have a question or a comment? Okay, hearing nothing else, I would like to thank everyone for calling in. Please stay safe and stay healthy. And unless there's further discussion, this concludes our telephonic meeting today. And for the record, the time is 2:30 p.m., exactly 30 minutes. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Happy birthday, Bill Kibler.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.